My name's Nikki Clark and I'm a disability rights campaigner and a parent patron for Ambitious About Autism. I'm mum to two girls who are both on the autistic spectrum and I'm a full-time carer for them. Lizzie's 18 and she has Asperger's syndrome, and Emily is 15 and she has autism, learning disabilities and epilepsy. For a while they were both in mainstream school, and then due to bullying and various different other issues, Emily went to the local specialist school and Lizzie went to an all-girls school, which sort of diminished the bullying quite considerably. We were very lucky in terms of diagnosis because Emmy was 3 when she was diagnosed, which I know is early, both from talking to other people and our experiences with Lizzie. So Emmy was diagnosed at the GP referred Emmy to the Child Development Centre, and because she was non-verbal there were concerns that perhaps she had a hearing loss or an impairment with her hearing. And we went along, and over the course of 2 days a week for 3 weeks Emmy was assessed, and we did lots of answering of questions and there were lots of observations, and she saw various different experts. And about halfway through the weeks that we were there, about halfway through the time, they diagnosed her with a learning disability. And then at the end of the period of time, all the parents go in and they meet with the psychologist and the paediatrician, and the paediatrician told us that it was autism. And I can just remember vividly saying, "No, I'm really sorry, I'm just going to have to stop you there because did you say autism?" And they said yes. And I said, "Okay, I've just got Rain Man on a perma-loop going through my head, so I'm going to go outside and have a cigarette and then I'm going to come back in and then you can explain it all to me again," which I did. And I'm so embarrassed, but I went outside and my legs gave way. It wasn't on our radar. We hadn't sort of envisaged this. We'd sort of factored in all of the things that she did and the sort of obsessions and the things of special interest that she had, this preoccupation with water and sand and soil and light, but autism just hadn't occurred to us, and it hadn't occurred to me probably because Emily was so very affectionate. You know, of the two of them, Lizzie was much more withdrawn and sort of aloof in a way, but in a very gentle way. But Emily would bound over and she'd jump onto my knee and she'd snuggle in for a cuddle. And again, this sort of cod understanding that we all sort of have when we know very little about a condition. And it's really informed my thinking now when I talk to people about autism or I campaign, is the fact that the myths and the stereotypes aren't always damaging, but they can be very, very limiting, both in what you as a parent expect and also what the world expects of people with autism. She was at her last year of junior school, and her last year of junior school was extraordinarily difficult for her. I mean, it was very, very difficult. She'd had a core group of friends from the age of 5, and they'd travelled up through every single class together, they'd stayed together, and they got to sort of 10 and everything for her just fell apart. She became isolated, she was bullied, she was ignored, she was ridiculed, and again, because of her Asperger's, she'd wanted to stay in that same vein of games and sort of conversations and interests. And of course they were into music and fashion and boys. And Lizzie became, I suppose, to them, viewed as a bit of a liability, really. It was much less clear and it was much more difficult to get a diagnosis for Lizzie. So I do totally understand and feel for parents with high-functioning children, especially girls who are much less likely to pick up a chair and lob it across a classroom. You know, the girls tend to very much internalise all of the things that they're feeling, blame themselves completely, and just to become very, very distressed and withdrawn, and she did. She became very withdrawn. She had low-level self-harming. She cried every single night. Oh, I'm going to cry. Lizzie's words were, "So you mean this isn't my fault?" Which for me made everything, all the fighting and all the struggling worthwhile, because yes, if that's the only thing people take away from diagnosis, whether they're 5 or whether they're 55, if that's what they have, either in reflecting on the lives that they've led or for the lives to come, then it's totally worth it. When you're fighting for a diagnosis, you become completely absorbed with that fight, and and it's suddenly apparent to you, and you just need everybody else to realise that, and so you fight for 18 months, you fight and you fight and you fight and you get there, and you were right. This isn't sort of Munchausen's by proxy or any of the multitude of things that parents go through, and you get there and you think, good, right, this is brilliant, Lizzie will get all the help she needs, and this will help her, and then you think, oh, I've got 2 children on the autistic spectrum, and then you sort of, I feel that if you spend your life as a carer or an advocate for someone with autism, and you have front and centre of your thinking the impact that diagnosis has on you, you can't advocate effectively. You have to remove yourself as their advocate from how that feels for you and what that means to you, and where you then fit into the strata of your friendships or people with neurotypical families. Because otherwise the decisions that you make will be coloured by your own view. And as an advocate, you have to put the wishes of the person that you're advocating for front and centre. I campaign on language around disability, and I particularly around comedy in disability. I'm very vocal on Twitter, but the thrust of my campaign was people, not punchlines, and it was around the notion that within the hate speech laws that we have, denigrating people with a disability, being verbally abusive to people with a disability, isn't seen as a crime in and of itself. So if you break into a disabled person's house and you, beat them up, and then you also call them one of many epithets for disability, that can lengthen your sentence. However, if a disabled person is walking down the street and they get verbally abused, on the grounds of their disability, on the basis of their disability, there is no actual specification within law, there's no legislation that includes it. And the whole point behind the campaign was the fact that disabled people should be included, as every other targeted group are included. And he started using the word Mong. I had to challenge him, and I wasn't alone in challenging him, and he kept repeating that he wasn't using that language that way, that this was a word that had died out. He had no frame of reference on whether that was used abusively. He had no understanding that was how it was done, and so he was simply using the word to mean idiot. Halfway through the week I was contacted by Nikki Campbell's programme on Radio 5 Live, and also Jeremy Vine's show. And from 7 o'clock in the morning until sort of 12 o'clock at night, I was getting abuse. And I was being told I was a Mary Whitehouse, and fair enough, and that, it was all censorship and speech should be free, and etc., etc. And I was trying to calmly explain. So sort of towards the end of the week, when I went, on the radio, I embarrassingly, and I was so angry with myself as a campaigner, but I broke down. Because they were asking me if we'd ever experienced this, personally. And yes, we have. Every time we go out, every time we leave the house, because of Emily's repetitive movements and because it's a way of alleviating her stress, she'll flick her hand, she will, squeal, she will be noisy. She draws the eye, and she draws abuse. And some of it's verbal, and some people will say to me, "What, that child needs a damn good slap," or "You'll get kids laughing." So I knew very much, and she's been referred to as a Mong. I was told by somebody not to play the Mong card when I tried to explain why we couldn't go to a party, because Emily won't leave the house, she won't go into a house of people she doesn't know. Lizzie was called a retard. And so when asked on a live by Jeremy Vine our experiences, I broke down. Now clearly either Ricky Gervais had heard this or been told about it, because I was contacted and it was evident within about a minute of speaking to him that he absolutely was devastated at the idea, not at the reaction he'd had, not that this impacted on him or his career or anything else. What became really clear from talking to him was how devastated he felt that somebody might be hurt by something he had done. Somebody with a disability might be targeted because of this. And it was really refreshing, you know, and the thing I took from it was he really didn't need to. He could have brushed it off, he could have been arrogant, he could have just walked away from it, but he genuinely had a concern, either that his fans were targeting people, you know, abusively, or that damage could be done by what he'd said. And just it was a really nice resolution to that situation. And I think it's when people realise, when they know better, they do better. You know, someone who doesn't have disability in their life, who doesn't love someone with a disability or isn't disabled, isn't necessarily going to get the ramifications of what they can do. What I want for Emmy is an independent living unit, so I'm holding on for the time when she can access that, because then she would naturally be leaving home. If we were going to live forever, then Emmy living with us forever wouldn't be a problem, but we're not. And if we make her world smaller and we don't give her the opportunities to live independently in some way, whatever level of independence she can achieve, if we don't do that, then we're failing as her parents and as her advocates. Amazing things. Lizzie saying to me, you know, growing up, what do clouds taste like? Emmy coming to me in the garden with a box of felt pens and pointing to the clouds and saying rainbow, you know, thinking that I can make one, you know. The way she has of seeing the world, the way that Lizzie has, the beautiful, unique take. I mean, this is why you can, you know, you look back through history and many of the leading innovators, clearly, when you reflect, were on the autistic spectrum, because that way of perceiving the world that doesn't factor in jealousy or manipulation or spite or malice or hatred for no reason, the way they have of reading people and seeing through all the periphery and all the superficiality straight to the heart of the person, these are things that are the benefits.